Imagine living in a time where breaking the law could mean something as wild as being banned from your own home or even being fined for simply walking the wrong way. The ancient Romans had some laws that are so bizarre, you'd think they were made up, but guess what? They were real, and they actually governed everyday life in one of the most powerful empires in history. Let's dive into some strange laws from ancient Rome that you won't believe actually existed. These are laws that will leave you stunned and thinking, how could they get away with that? But before we get started, stick around till the end because we're going to explore not just the weirdest laws, but also how these odd rules might still influence our world today. Trust me, you're going to be shocked at how much the Romans really had an eye for detail and the unexpected by the time we finish. You'll be looking at the ancient Romans in a whole new light. These laws were not only strange, but surprisingly advanced in some ways. 1. No pissing in public. In ancient Rome, there was one law that you definitely didn't want to break if you were caught pissing in public. The Romans had a very strict rule about public urination. It was actually illegal to relieve yourself in public places like the streets, and they took it very seriously. If someone was caught, they could be fined. What's more surprising is that Romans had a kind of public bathroom system called Vespasiani, named after Emperor Vespasian, where people could go and relieve themselves. These public toilets were often communal. But if you were caught doing it in the wrong place, that was another story. The punishment for violating this law could range from a fine to a public embarrassment, and in extreme cases, even worse. Imagine living in a time when using the wrong corner of the street could land you in trouble. Not only did this keep things clean, but it also made sure that the citizens maintain a level of dignity in public spaces. The Roman Empire was incredibly advanced in organizing public hygiene, something we don't always realize when we think about ancient times. 2. Laws about clothing. It's hard to believe that clothing in ancient Rome was controlled by the law, but it was. Roman citizens had to wear certain kinds of clothes depending on their social status. For instance, only Roman citizens were allowed to wear the toga, which was a symbol of their citizenship. If you weren't a citizen, wearing one could get you into a lot of trouble. The toga was a distinct, cumbersome garment that was hard to wear, but it was seen as a mark of Roman identity. What's even stranger is that there were strict laws regarding the color of clothing. For instance, the color purple was reserved for the emperor and the upper class. This was because purple dye was incredibly rare and expensive, and it became a symbol of royalty. If anyone else dared to wear purple, they could face serious legal consequences, even though it might seem like such a minor thing today. Similarly, Roman women also had specific rules about how they could dress. Wearing bright, flashy colors was often seen as a sign of improper behavior. 3. The death penalty for unchastity. Now, this one might surprise you. There were laws that stated women could be punished by death for certain acts of unchastity, like committing adultery. But that wasn't all. Even their husbands had the right to execute them if they caught them in the act. It wasn't just women. Men could also be punished for infidelity, but typically the laws were much harsher on women, reflecting the societal norms of that time. It's crazy to think that something like a relationship could be governed by laws so strict that it would lead to such a severe punishment. Adultery laws were part of the Roman family law system, and they were intended to maintain the honor of the household. But these laws often led to severe consequences, especially for women. It was not just about moral rules. It was also about family reputation and social order. These extreme laws led to a lot of tension within Roman families, and in some cases, individuals were punished even if they didn't commit the crime. For the forbidden left-handedness, yes, you read that right. In ancient Rome, being left-handed was not just frowned upon, it was downright illegal. The Romans believed that the left hand was unlucky and evil, so much so that they thought using it for daily tasks could bring misfortune. If you were caught using your left hand in public, it could be punished. This might sound extreme, but for the Romans, it was all about maintaining a sense of order and tradition. They saw the right hand as a symbol of power, and it was considered sacred in many rituals. Left-handed people were often forced to adjust to society where right-handedness was the norm. If you were born left-handed back then, you would have had to learn how to be right-handed or face the consequences. The idea behind this law was rooted in superstition, and the Romans' belief in omens, but also shows how society was obsessed with control, order, and conformity. 5. Don't even think about owning a slave without registering them. Slavery was a common practice in ancient Rome, but the Romans took a step further when it came to legalities around slaves. They required owners to register their slaves with the government. If you didn't, it was considered illegal and could lead to serious fines. The Romans even had a law that said slaves who ran away should be branded, and any slave found after escaping would be returned to their owners. These laws were not only harsh, but also put the power of control in the hands of the government, giving them insight into the slave economy. Slaves had no rights, and they were often treated as property, so much so that their value was calculated in terms of how much labor they could produce. The punishment for runaway slaves was severe. If a slave was caught, they could be punished, sometimes even killed, as a warning to others. This was part of the Roman system of control that ensured the stability of their empire, but it came at the expense of basic human rights. 6. The one-woman man law. There was a surprising law that said a Roman man could only be married to one woman at a time, despite the fact that they often had relationships with slaves or courtesans. But the rule was strict when it came to formal marriages. If a Roman man decided to marry more than one woman, he was breaking the law. Polyandry, where a woman has more than one husband, was also strictly prohibited. So, despite the often turbulent and complex private lives, Roman law had some clear rules about family structures that would probably seem pretty modern by today's standards. Roman men, especially those in the upper classes, often had several partners, but marriage was still considered a sacred institution. This law was a way of ensuring that family heritage and property remained in the hands of the legitimate heirs. The legal enforcement of monogamy showed the Romans' attempt to control and stabilize their society, even in personal matters. 7. Don't use offensive hand gestures. In ancient Rome, using offensive hand gestures was more than just bad manners. It was illegal. The infamous fig gesture, where the thumb is placed between the index and middle fingers, was seen as a sign of disrespect and was punishable by fines. It's hard to imagine, but the Romans actually had an official rule for this. The idea was that such gestures could upset public order, and the state was eager to avoid any disruption in its highly organized society. Roman laws were designed to maintain harmony, and public order was considered crucial. This law might sound funny to us today, but to the Romans, it was a serious offense. The government's attempt to regulate public behavior was extensive, and it even extended to the smallest details. In a way, it shows how deeply the Roman state cared about controlling behavior, even at the individual level. 8. The law of the cursus honorum. This law was a strict set of guidelines that determined a career path for ambitious Roman citizens. If you wanted to be in politics, you had to follow this pathway, started with lower positions and gradually working your way up through more prestigious offices. It was almost like a promotion ladder where each step required certain achievements and experiences. Failing to adhere to the cursus honorum, even if you were a wealthy and powerful citizen, could ruin your career. This system ensured that the most capable and experienced individuals held high office in Rome. But at the same time, it also created opportunities for corruption and favoritism. The cursus honorum reflects how the Romans valued not only experience but also political loyalty. It shows how the political landscape was shaped by laws that defined who could and couldn't rise through the ranks. 9. Murder of slaves was legal. Yes, you heard that right. If a Roman master killed one of their slaves, it wasn't considered a crime in Roman law. Slaves were seen as property, not people, and so the murder of a slave was treated much the same way as damaging any other property. This shows just how different the ancient world was, and how laws protected the ownership of slaves while disregarding their basic human rights. This law is one of the many reasons why the Roman Empire's system of slavery was so brutal. Slaves had no rights and were considered expendable. The Roman economy was heavily dependent on slave labor, and laws like this allowed the empire to maintain that structure without question. It's chilling to think about how human lives could be reduced to property and how little value was placed on their well-being. 10. Law of the Lex Julia. This law was created to combat adultery and encourage marriage among the Roman elite. But here's the catch. It went beyond just regulating the relationships between men and women. The Lex Julia also required citizens to report anyone caught committing adultery. If they didn't, they themselves could be punished for failing to report it. This led to a culture where people were encouraged to spy on their neighbors and report any moral wrongdoing. It might sound like an episode of a reality TV show, but it was very much part of Roman law. The Lex Julia reflected the Roman Empire's obsession with moral and social order. It was a law designed to preserve the integrity of the Roman family unit and to keep the elite in check. The pressure to report someone for infidelity created a culture of surveillance and mistrust, which permeated Roman society. Now that we've uncovered some of the strangest laws from ancient Rome, you might be thinking, how could they get away with that? But despite how strange or harsh these laws seem, they played a crucial role in shaping the Roman Empire's powerful structure. These laws not only influenced everyday life, but also laid the foundation for modern legal systems in some ways. Isn't it amazing how far we've come since then? Before you go, if you enjoyed learning about these bizarre ancient laws, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We got so much more fascinating history to explore together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.